Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a topic you guys specifically requested: toxic relationships. We've got a really interesting mix of sources for this one. A bunch of relationship experts from YouTube, actually. And I'm hoping with expert speakers' help, we can all leave here today knowing how to spot those red flags.
Absolutely. And, having the vocabulary to identify those patterns can be so empowering in itself.
That's a really good point. And actually, that makes me think, we hear toxic thrown around all the time these days, but what does it actually mean when we're talking about relationships? What are we really talking about?
Right. It's not about just slapping a label on someone, being like, you're toxic, like they're beyond hope.
Yeah.
It's more about recognizing those harmful patterns of behavior that ultimately damage the relationship.
So it's less about an individual being toxic and more about the dynamic between people, right?
Exactly. And probably the most fundamental thing those unhealthy patterns erode is a sense of safety within the relationship.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of our sources, Dr. David Hawkins, talks about that, about feeling safe or not feeling safe. He says in a toxic relationship, a lot of times you might think, I don't feel safe bringing up a concern with them, with my partner. And wow, if you can't even talk to your partner, that's got to say something.
It's huge. I mean, think about it. If you're walking on eggshells all the time, afraid to express your needs or what you're concerned about, how can you really be yourself? Lack of safety just totally kills communication, which is the foundation of any healthy relationship.
It really does. It's you're always worried you're going to say the wrong thing and then everything explodes. And that reminds me of something that Matthew Hussey said. He's that dating coach. He pointed out that toxic people, when you're having an argument, they look to inflict damage and not actually solve the problem.
Oh, that's so true. And that one really stuck with me too, because, disagreements, those are going to happen in any relationship. It's just inevitable. But in a healthy relationship, you see those as opportunities to, understand each other better and figure out, okay, how do we fix this? How do we move forward? But when someone's always trying to win the argument or put you down, it just creates that same unsafe environment where you're always on edge, you're always defensive.
Yeah, totally. They're approaching it like it's a battle to be won and not an opportunity to connect. Mm-hmm. And you know what? This theme of criticism, people constantly being criticized, that comes up again and again in our sources. Actually, both Dr. Hawkins and this pasted text source, it looks kind of like a podcast script, actually. They both talk about that a lot.
Yeah, and it makes sense that they would.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit of constructive criticism can be healthy in any relationship, but when it's constant,
yeah,
it's a whole other thing.
Totally. It's a completely different beast.
Right.
And that Dr. Hawkins quote where he says, "Nothing I ever do is right." Ugh, can you imagine being told that all the time? Just constant? That would be awful.
It would be soul-crushing, truly. It's so insidious because over time, that just chips away at you. It erodes your self-worth. You start to second-guess yourself, constantly doubt your instincts, everything. And honestly, that just plays right into what the toxic person wants.
Oh, totally. So you're already feeling unsure of yourself. And then you get to Matthew Hussey's point about how toxic people, they make you feel like you're the problem. You are the root of all evil. You're to blame for everything that's wrong in their life.
It's such a classic manipulation tactic. It's all about, them refusing to take responsibility for their own actions or their feelings. So they just project all of that onto you. And suddenly it's their bad mood is your fault. Their problems at work are your fault. Everything is your fault.
Wow. So not only are they criticizing you constantly, but now you're responsible for all their baggage too.
You got it. And let me tell you, that can really mess you up. It can really damage your self-esteem and your ability to trust yourself, trust what you're seeing, trust what you're feeling, because you start to think, maybe it really is me. Maybe I am the problem. Which is, of course, exactly what the toxic person wants you to think. It really is. And that's why remember, you can't control another person's happiness. You can't. You can be supportive, of course, you can be loving, but you can't fix someone else's issues. You can't. Especially when they're busy making you feel like you are the issue, It's this constant loop of self-doubt you get stuck in. It's a vicious cycle, seriously. And it can be so, so hard to break free. And unfortunately, this often ties into another thing you see a lot in toxic relationships: isolation. Yeah, right. That pasted text source, that podcast script thing we mentioned, it actually talks about how toxic partners will try to control who you see, your friends or what you do, where you go. It's they want to cut you off from anyone else who might see things differently. Right. Exactly. because they know, right? Like the more isolated you are, the more you depend on them for everything. For validation, for companionship, for everything.
And the harder it becomes to see this situation clearly, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. You're stuck in their bubble, hearing their side of the story on repeat over and over and over again.
It's like, what's that saying? If you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, something like that.
Exactly. Like when that's all you're exposed to, their messed up view of reality, it's so easy to just lose track of your own instincts, you know?
And even harder to leave. I bet leaving is just...
It is so hard. Leaving a toxic relationship, it's a whole process, usually. It's not like you just wake up one day and you're out. It takes time, like real time, to rebuild your sense of self, to connect with your own people again, your support system, and just to like start trusting yourself again.
That's why I thought that bit in the pasted text source about like reasserting your independence was so powerful, because it really is about that, like remembering you can make your own choices. You can have your own friends. You can have a whole life outside of this relationship.
It really is. It's about boundaries,
you
know, healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Because you are allowed to have needs and you are allowed to have boundaries. You deserve to be with someone who respects that.
Yeah, for sure. It's not selfish to want to feel safe and respected with your partner. If anything, it's essential. Which actually, speaking of feeling safe, Dr. Hawkins talked about how, like, even when you get out of a toxic relationship, the effects of it can stick with you. Like, for a long time, he mentioned things like anxiety, stress, even like symptoms of PTSD.
And he's right. Toxic relationships, they can leave some serious scars, emotionally speaking. It's important to remember that healing from that kind of experience, it takes time and support.
And that's where I imagine professional help could be so huge, right?
It's huge. Seriously. A good therapist can be a game changer. They can give you a space to, you know, actually work through those experiences, to develop healthy coping skills for all the like leftover stuff, and just to start putting your life back together, you know?
Just having someone to talk to who can be objective about it all, I bet that's invaluable. Because when you're in it, it's like...
Oh, it's impossible. It's like you can't see the forest for the trees.
Exactly. Which is why I'm so glad we're having this deep dive. Because it's so easy to get like wrapped up in the day-to-day of a relationship, you know? But then taking the time to actually look at these patterns, like really understand the dynamics at play, that's how we learn and get better.
And hopefully avoid making those same mistakes again, you know, in our next relationships.
Totally. And, you know, we've been like really focusing on the negative today, all the red flags, warning signs of a toxic relationship. But like, this isn't meant to be all doom and gloom, right? If anything, I hope this is empowering. Remember that point from Psych2Go about trusting your gut? This would be a good time to like take a second and think, what's sticking with me from this conversation? Like what feels relevant to my own life?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes like even just having the words for something, you know, like being able to say, hold on, that thing my partner does, that's like textbook gaslighting. Even just that can be huge.
Oh, 100%. Seriously, just putting a name to it, realizing that like, this isn't just you, this is a real thing. Other people experience this too. That can be so validating.
Totally. And once you can see it, you know, recognize it for what it is, then you can start taking steps to like protect yourself.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right? Like they always say. And that actually brings us to a really important question. If you realize you're in a toxic relationship, what can you actually do about it? Well, that pasted text source, the podcast script we keep mentioning, that actually talks a lot about setting boundaries and how important that is.
It's huge EE. Like boundaries are important in any relationship, but in a toxic one, it's essential. Seriously.
It's like, it's how you tell the other person, okay, this is okay and this is not okay. You know, what you will and will not put up with.
Exactly. And that can be like anything from saying no, like actually saying the word no when they ask you to do something you're not comfortable with, to like limiting contact, all the way to like ending the relationship completely, whatever it takes.
It's about taking back your power, putting yourself first.
Totally. And remember, like setting boundaries, that's not about controlling the other person, you know? It's about you deciding what you're okay with and taking control of your own life, your own choices.
Which I imagine can be so hard, especially if you've been in that toxic environment for a while. Like you might feel guilty or scared, like you can't even. Oh, of course. Totally. It's normal to feel all of that. I mean, these relationships are draining, you know? Emotionally, mentally, the works. But you have to remember, you are not alone.
Right. And that's where, again, having a professional, a therapist or someone in your corner
They can make all the difference, honestly. A therapist can give you the tools, to actually set those boundaries and work through all those feelings you're having, and just to start healing. It's huge.
And they can probably help you spot those same unhealthy patterns, right? So you don't end up in the same kind of relationship again down the line.
Exactly. Because sometimes you don't even realize you're repeating those same patterns until you talk it through with someone. And then, of course, don't forget about your people, friends, family, support groups, whoever.
So important. Because being around positive people who support you.
It's like building a raft to get you off that island, the island of toxicity. I love that. And at the end of the day, I think that's really what it's all about. This whole conversation, it's about protecting yourself, putting your own happiness first, building a life where you can actually thrive.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. And that's really what I hope you take away from this. You deserve to be in a relationship where you feel safe, where you feel respected and loved for who you are.
Where you can be yourself,
Yeah.
without feeling like you're going to get judged or criticized or worse. So yeah, trust your gut, set those boundaries, and remember, you deserve to be happy.
You do. And you're not alone.
And of course, we'll link to some helpful resources in the show notes, so be sure to check those out if you need them. All right, that's it for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep building those healthy relationships.